Hello everyone, welcome back to today's story. In this video, James faces the lowest point of his life after being fired from his father's company for refusing to give up the woman he loves, Diep. Stripped of wealth, position, and pride, James falls into poverty. But instead of leaving, Diep stands firmly by his side. Together, they promise to rebuild their future from nothing, with only love and determination to guide them. Stay with us until the very end to see how their courage shines through hardship. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support truly means the world to us. The screen opens to the soft, weary glow of a desk lamp. James's mother sits alone, her hand gripping the phone with desperate strength. The shrill buzz cuts through the silence, and her trembling voice rises. Why was my son fired? What's so wrong with him loving a single mother? Every word quivers between fear and fury. On the other end, James's father speaks, his tone cold and unyielding. I only want family honor. That's all that matters. His words slice through the quiet like a blade. The mother tries to reason, her voice breaking as she speaks of Nye, the sweet little girl, and of James's love for Diep. But before she can finish, his voice interrupts, firm and cruel. She's been married before. She already has a child. I will not allow it. Her hands clench the phone, as if holding something that might shatter. She pleads, reminding him of his age, of his fear of loneliness, of the danger of tearing the family apart. Yet he remains unmoved, his pride solid as stone. Come to Vietnam. Talk to him face to face, she begs, her voice nearly breaking. But his refusal is swift. I have meetings. I won't come. The line goes dead. She sits there, the weight of his decision pressing against her chest. Her fingers brush against James's framed photo, her eyes clouding with helplessness. Outside, rain begins to fall. Each drop taps the glass like a heartbeat, slow and unrelenting. Her regret hangs heavy in the air. Honor or love? The question remains unanswered, echoing inside the quiet room as shadows stretch across her worried face. Night cloaks the city. Neon lights flicker over the narrow alleyways, painting everything in harsh, restless colors. James staggers down the street, his friends close behind, their laughter dissolving into unease. His face is red, his eyes glazed from too much alcohol. Suddenly, he collapses, the sharp shatter of a glass bottle echoing across the pavement. Call an ambulance, one of his friends cries, panic rising. They scramble, fumbling with their phones, fear in their eyes. But James stirs, pushing himself up with trembling hands. No need. I'm just drunk, he mutters, his voice rough, trying to mask the storm inside. His friends exchange uneasy glances, but they let it go. James forces a laugh, though it's hollow, and waves them off. Let's go home, he mumbles, but the words carry no strength. His figure slumps forward, a man weighed down by more than liquor. The city's glow blurs as he stumbles onward, each step heavy, each breath shallow. The thought of Diep and little Nie gnaws at him, colliding with the harsh reality of being cast out from the company his own father once trusted him to lead. Pride gone, position gone, future gone. He tells himself there's no real accident here, that it's only the drink. But deep down, he knows the truth. His world has collapsed, and he's standing in the ruins. His friend pats his shoulder, but James shakes it off, unwilling to let anyone see the depth of his despair. The neon lights reflect off his weary frame as he disappears into the night. The sound of car horns and rushing engines fade, leaving only the echo of his uneven footsteps. Alone, lost, pretending to be fine when inside, he's breaking. Morning comes, and inside a cramped office, fluorescent lights hum against the silence. Piles of paperwork cover the desk. Diep sits there, going through ledgers with steady hands, her eyes sharp but tired. Potatoes, ginger, grapefruit. How are this season's imports? She asks, her tone calm, though worry threads through her words. The manager answers with details, but then adds, the young master hasn't checked these records in weeks. Diep freezes for a moment, sadness flickering across her face. She remembers James, once so full of fire, ambition, and drive. Now that fire has dimmed, smothered by the cruelty of his father. She sets the ledger aside, gathers her things, and heads home. The sun is setting, streaking the horizon with crimson light. But as she drives, a sharp beep pulls her gaze to the dashboard, her fuel gauge, barely 80 kilometers left. Her hand searches her wallet. Empty. A sinking feeling spreads through her chest. She recalls the theft that morning, her purse robbed in the crowded market. Worse, her bank account remains frozen, locked down by James's father, leaving her powerless. She grips the steering wheel tightly, fighting the panic building inside. With a steadying breath, she dials her mother. Mom, could you transfer me $1 million? Just enough for gas. Her tone stays calm, but her knuckles whiten against the wheel. Her mother's gentle reply offers comfort, a brief spark of warmth in the storm. Yet Diep's eyes drift to the busy streets, where lights flash and traffic roars. Life moves on, but she feels trapped in a current too strong to swim against. She thinks of Nee, waiting at home, and of James, broken but still fighting. Their days have become an endless struggle, each one a test of endurance. The car rolls forward slowly, every hum of the engine reminding her how fragile their stability has become. Against the backdrop of the fading sun, her silhouette appears small, yet unyielding. A woman bound by love, weighed by burdens, and determined to hold her world together. The cafe smells of bitter coffee and cigarette smoke. James sits across from an employee, his face shadowed with exhaustion, but his eyes sharp. How's the progress on Tan Min? He asks, flipping through thick reports. The employee hesitates before answering. Costs have gone over budget. The bridge and foundation work, it's already at 4.1 billion. We estimated 3. James's jaw tightens, his brow furrowing. He stresses the importance of accuracy, of professional reporting. Every detail matters now. Materials, foundations, everything. We can't afford mistakes. His voice is firm, but there's a weariness beneath it. He recalls the early days when rough estimates were enough. Now, survival demands perfection. But then, the employee stops him, eyes darting away. The chairman, your father, he fired you. We can't take orders from you anymore. James freezes. His hand shakes as he sets down his coffee cup. My father said that? His voice is hollow, as though the floor has disappeared beneath him. The air and the cafe grows heavy. The hum of conversation turning into sharp whispers that cut at him like glass. James stares at his reflection in the window. A man stripped of his title, stripped of his identity. "I'll talk to him," he mutters, but even he can hear the weakness in his own voice. The employee says nothing. James rises, each step heavy, like dragging chains behind him. The cafe's bell jingles faintly as he pushes open the door. Outside, the city moves on, busy, indifferent, alive. James lingers for a moment, staring at his reflection in the glass, a man no longer who he once was. His dream, his power, his family name, all gone. What remains is only the weight of loss and the crushing silence of abandonment. The sounds of the cafe fade behind him, replaced by the cold hum of the city. He walks forward, shoulders slumped, his figure swallowed by the crowd. The world doesn't stop for him. It never will. For James, everything has changed. And yet, this is only the beginning. The streets hum with life, but James feels like a ghost drifting through them. The weight of betrayal presses down with every step. Fired by his own father, cut off, discarded. He reaches the small apartment he now shares with Diep and Nye. The once proud heir to a family empire now unlocks a modest wooden door with trembling hands. Inside, the warmth of home greets him. Diep looks up from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a cloth. Nye runs toward him, her laughter cutting through the silence. James bends down, scooping her up, holding her tight as though afraid she might slip away too. Diep's smile softens, but she sees the storm in his eyes. "James, what happened?" she asks gently. He sets Nye down, his voice low. "It's over. He fired me. Everything. The company. The future I thought I had. It's gone." For a moment, the room falls silent. The clock ticks. The kettle whistles. Then Diep steps forward, placing her hand firmly on his arm. "James, listen to me. You haven't lost everything. You still have me. You still have Nye. And we'll start again. Together." Her words cut through his despair like a lifeline. Tears well in his eyes, though he tries to hold them back. "But I've lost everything else. My father, my pride. I can't give you the life you deserve." Diep shakes her head firmly. "Don't say that. We don't need his wealth. We don't need his company. We'll build our own life, even if it's from nothing. Do you hear me? From two empty hands, we can still create something better." James stares at her, her strength shining through the shadows that consume him. Slowly, he nods. "You really believe that?" She smiles faintly, though her eyes are determined. "I don't just believe it. I know it." The camera lingers on their embrace, two souls clinging to each other amidst the wreckage of lost fortune. Days turn into weeks. James tries to adjust to a life stripped of privilege. Gone are the sleek cars, the lavish office, the constant stream of respect from employees. Instead, mornings begin with searching for odd jobs. Evenings with exhaustion pressing down on his shoulders. One morning, he rises before dawn, pulling on a worn jacket. He heads to a construction site, hoping for day labor. The foreman glances at his soft hands and tailored voice, scoffing at first. But James insists, and soon he's lifting heavy beams, sweat soaking through his clothes. Every movement burns. His muscles ache, unused to such strain. But still, he pushes on, gritting his teeth. This is no longer about pride. It's about survival, about proving he can stand without his father's empire beneath him. At home, Diep tends to knee, but she too is fighting her battles. Her bank account remains frozen, and finding stable income proves harder than she imagined. She tries selling imported goods, even cooking meals for delivery. Each day a gamble to scrape together enough for rent and food. One night, she sits at the kitchen table, ledgers spread before her. James walks in, his body aching from work, his hands blistered. She looks up, offering a tired smile. "How much today?" "Not much," he admits, lowering himself into the chair beside her. "But it's something. We'll get through this." Her fingers brush his, and for a moment, silence fills the room, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of Nee's soft breathing in the next room. The days blur into hardship, yet within the struggle, something new begins to bloom. James, once a man defined by his father's name, starts to discover the strength of his own will. Diep, hardened by years of sacrifice, becomes his steady anchor. But the world doesn't pause for them. Rumors spread quickly, whispers in cafes and offices about the fallen heir. Former colleagues avoid eye contact, some sneer behind his back. Even his friends, once close, begin to distance themselves, uncomfortable with his new reality. James feels the sting of it all, but each time despair threatens to drown him, he remembers Diep's words. From two empty hands, we can still create something better. One rainy evening, James returns home drenched, carrying a sack of groceries bought with his day's wages. Diep rushes to the door, worry etched into her face. "You'll get sick working like this," she scolds gently. He sets the bag on the table, water dripping onto the floor. "It's worth it. Every drop of sweat, every ache, it's worth it. Because it's for us. For you. For Nye." Her eyes glisten as she meets his gaze. In that moment, despite the peeling paint on the walls and the worn furniture, their home feels rich, filled with a kind of love no wealth could buy. But beneath their fragile happiness, the shadow of James's father still looms. Though he no longer speaks to his son, his power ripples through every corner of the city. Businesses close their doors to James, fearful of crossing the powerful chairman. Opportunities vanish before they can even begin. One night, as James lies awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, he whispers, "Maybe he was right. Maybe I was nothing without the company." Diep, half asleep, turns toward him. Her voice is soft but firm. "You were never nothing, and you never will be. He may have stripped you of a title, but he can't strip you of who you are. You're stronger than you think." The words sink deep, a balm against the wounds of pride. James exhales slowly, holding her close. The story doesn't resolve with riches regained or revenge served. Not yet. Instead, it lingers on the image of two people sitting side by side, their hands intertwined, determined to rebuild from the ruins. For James, this is the hardest chapter of his life. For Diep, it is a test of devotion. Together, they face the storm, not as heirs or outcasts, but as partners, bound by love, ready to fight for a future they'll create with their own hands. And as the screen fades to black, the question lingers. Will their love be strong enough to turn loss into new beginnings? Only time will tell.